This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so I think the first thing that would be good for us to do is maybe go around and do some introductions, which is a bit challenging. I just want to make sure that we note for Caitlin, who is doing our note taking too, who is present online, and we've got a few folks here present in person. So I'll start with the people here in person, and then we'll move online, and I'll kind of call you by name. Okay? Scott, do you mind?
Scott Sertzano from West Des Moines.
Mike Cody Weaver, City of Johnston.
Jamie Built with West Des Moines Waterworks.
All right. I think I'm just gonna go down the list of attendees, and not everybody has a name by it, so if I don't call you at the end, feel free to introduce yourself, and so we can make note of that on the record. It looks like Addison Ladders. Maybe not a speaker, it doesn't look like the ability to voice. All right, Addison, later on, if you want to introduce yourself, you're welcome to. Amy Kaler.
Hi, Amy Kaler, Des Moines Waterworks. I am the CFO.
Also, if you are a representative or an alternate, kind of make note of that too, if you don't mind.
Oh, and also an alternate to the board.
Thank you, Amy. Brad Dietz.
Brad Dietz, City of Waukee.
Very good. And as I mentioned, Caitlin is online. She is doing our note taking. Caitlin, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Caitlin Caldwell from Des Moines Waterworks. I work in engineering. I'll be taking the notes.
Thank you, Caitlin. Dale Atchison. Oh.
Dale Atchison, General Manager, Urbandale Water Utility.
All right. David Jones.
David Jones, City Manager in Ankeny.
Thank you, David. Jody Smith.
And Jody Smith, a West Des Moines SP, and they're designated to the CIWW board.
Thanks, Jody. John Edwards.
John Edwards, Clive Mayor designee.
Thank you, John. Kevin Hensley.
Kevin Hensley, City of Grimes, Public Works Director.
Thanks, Kevin. Lindsay Offenberger. Hopefully I said that right.
Hi, Lindsay Offenberger with the City of Norwalk, and I've got Luke Nelson with me.
Hey, everybody.
Hello. Welcome. Matt McQuillan.
I'm McQuillan, Clive City Manager, and I'm the alternate on the CIWW board for Clive.
Matt. Melissa Walker.
Melissa Walker, Des Moines Waterworks, Communications and Outreach Manager.
Neil Weiss. Not sure if he's connected online yet. Neil, are you on there? Might still be trying to get audio figured out based on what it looks like on my end. So we'll circle back if Neil comes online. Richard Lovett.
I'm the Virginia Rural Water. I'm the designate. I'm the chairman of the board.
Very good. Royce Hammett.
Royce Hammett, Xenia Rural Water District General Manager, and I'm an alternate.
Thanks, Royce. Stan Ripperger. Stan, we didn't hear anything. It looked like you unmuted yourself, but I didn't hear anything. Still no luck, Stan. Stan's with Warren Rollwater. That much I can tell you. Sue Hubbard.
Sue Hubbard, Des Moines Waterworks Board, and also a designee on CIWW.
Ted Corrigan.
Ted Corrigan, I'm the CEO at Des Moines Waterworks, and I am an alternate on the CIWW board.
And Tom Cope.
Tom Cope, City of Johnston, City Council, and designee for the CIWW.
Very good. All right, is there anybody else? I've got a few kind of not identified, possibly, or had any troubles with unmuting at the time. You're welcome at this time to kind of introduce yourself.
I'm John McEwen, Chairman of the Urbandale Water Utility and the designee.
Oh, hi, John.
And this is Diane Munns, and I'm a trustee at the Des Moines Waterworks and a designee on this board.
And Neil, I see you. Did you get your audio figured out?
Yes, I hope so. Neil Weiss, Urbandale Water, and I am an alternate for this board.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Jake Anderson. I'm the city administrator in Grimes, and I'll be the policy committee representative.
Okay. All right, last calls. All right. Well, I think first on our list, and we kind of just have a short list of things today, just trying to get, you know, a little organized while we're waiting for the final two to, that's a Warren Rollwater and Grimes to do their final actions with their respective board or council, is to kind of maybe knock off a couple of items on a pretty large to-do list today. And so I think the first thing that would be good is to, any of those of you that are on here that are either trustees or alternates, fantastic. You've gotten that part done. And I think we have given that to Amy Kaler, has kind of been the keeper of that right now. If there are any entities that are on here that have not yet done their board representative and their alternate, this is still going to be a little reminder to maybe work on getting that complete so we can put that list together here in the next few weeks. Probably other things that maybe a couple other items I call housekeeping items is the signature page for the 28E. Once your entity has signed on that, Amy Kaler is kind of the organizer. Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misspeaking. She's kind of organizing all those signature pages so that when the final entity signs, we can file that with the state and formalize the entity. Because technically right now there is no Central Iowa Waterworks until that is filed with the state. And so if you, as an entity, if you've not done those things yet, put that on your to-do list to get done. That way, when the 28E can be filed, we have an idea of who the board and board alternates will be and can start that process of getting the first board meeting together and ready to go. So other things that may not be on your radar that that you'll need to do as well is, you know, as an entity, you'll need to formalize your technical committee rep. that organization or that committee has just, I'll say the staff members generally have been meeting just to kind of, we already as a metro in general meet on a fairly regular basis, but we've been trying to organize that technical committee just because those discussions and studies have been ongoing for quite a while. Things like planning for future water supply, and that was going to happen whether CIWW happened or whether that was going to be under the Des Moines Water Works umbrella. So a formal action on your tech committee member and then your long range committee member, just be thinking about those things and planning accordingly for that. So there's your first to-do list, I guess, our first to-dos to be thinking about. I think one of the items that we wanted to talk about was thinking about a tentative date for the first board meeting. And then obviously there's a lot of other meetings that go on along the metro, including your own respective council and board meetings, plus NPO meetings that I know some of our likely representatives may be on, or DART, or Metro Waste, or WRA even. So if you can imagine, I think this was shared, and I'll share this, this document that was sent out. Shows where all the current meetings are at and the times of the month. And so, you know, what we kind of want to do here is sort of talk about where the first, well, when the first meeting might take place, where it might take place at, and when. So if someone has figured this all out already, you're welcome to speak up and see, share your thoughts on this or share what you know about the prospective location that we might be able to have it at. So I'll open up discussion about that.
Christina, I just put in the chat that Norwalk's is wrong. It's the first and third at 6 is correct, but it should be Thursdays.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jody. And I put together that spreadsheet based on direct knowledge and or what was on the websites and asked for corrections. And so I'm glad that I got this correction Norwalk from the first, from Tuesday to Thursday being the first and third. So thank you for that correction.
Jody, it's a little hard to, could you speak up just a little bit? It's a little hard to hear you here.
Okay, Jody Smith from West Des Moines, and put together the spreadsheet based on what I knew directly and or what was available on the websites. And this is just for background purposes, as Christina stated, this is kind of a shot in the dark trying to put together a potential date and time for at least the initial meeting. Also, there's been suggestions from several entities that trying to get the 13 members together at one location, plus potentially 13 alternates plus staff. It's going to take a rather large room. And so I also made a couple of inquiries, one of the Metro Planning Organization. The MPO boardroom seats a lot of folks. They indicated that they would be more than willing to accommodate us if we wanted to go to a neutral site. Likewise, the Metro Waste Authority has a boardroom that's not used only a couple of times a month on a regular basis. They usually have a board table that would seat to 13 people. And they also would be more than willing to accommodate Central Iowa Water Works. And that doesn't negate potentially meeting in any one of the other entities. It's just that there's been a suggestion to look at some neutral sites, at least from the get-go. So that's background. Those are two options. There are many other options as far as locations. But we still have, I think, a number of folks that have not identified their designee. And those folks, as well as the ones that have been designated, if you have days and times that on your own personal calendar that are not on this spreadsheet, it would be good to have that information shared so we can try and maybe shoot for the initial meeting. Maybe that will lead to a consensus on using that date and time the future for at least part of the remainder of 2024. So I've talked a lot. If other folks have opinions and options, more than willing to listen and to make this thing work.
Jody, it was a little hard still for me to hear you. It was a little garbled for some reason. I'm not sure why. What was the date that you were suggesting as a tentative board meeting date and the location?
I did not suggest a date or a time or a location. I'm still looking for thoughts as to other folks that have personal conflicts of the designees and the alternates. So I did not suggest a certain date, time, or location, Christina.
Okay.
Until then, the early part of the second quarter has been proposed by documents that were sent out by Des Moines Water Works to all the entities last fall, suggesting that early in the second quarter of 2024.
Okay. Does anybody else have any feedback on maybe possible locations? We talked about Metro Waste and what was the other one? I'm sorry. MPO, thank you. Any other feedback maybe on those locations from other meetings that, you know, pros and cons possibly to be considering?
This is for the mayors, Christina. I think Mylog, Mayor Edwards, is that, I know that's on Wednesdays. Is that the second or third Wednesday of the month? Any of the mayors, do you remember what, is it the third Wednesday of the month?
Third Wednesday.
I just
And
know
then
that
MAC
others,
is the second Tuesday, 7:30 a.m. My log would be 6 o'clock the third Wednesday.
I just know that there's going to be a number of mayors that are appointees, so that's one to keep in mind. Because I was just looking at this, Christina, I was thinking, you know, Wednesday, if we could do, you know, Wednesday later in the day that doesn't fall on those other ones. So it sounds like the third Wednesday of the month is the one that's got a conflict, but maybe not the first or the second if it's later in the day. I see MPO is the only one that's on the second Wednesday of the month, but that's an over lunch hour, I think. But just a suggestion.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, one thing I think that we'll have to take into account is a lot, and we see this with entities that maybe only meet once a month, is, you know, if there's a financial report for the month before, that first Wednesday could get pretty tight trying to turn that around unless it's delayed a month, if that makes sense. You're delayed in approving it. So that's why, you know, trying to push it a little further in the month would be ideal from that perspective. But certainly we could figure out a way around that, I think, with just getting the right timing down.
So maybe that fourth Wednesday of the month.
Could be.
Fourth Wednesday of the month kind of helps you with your month end of the month before and getting it in the agenda packet a week ahead. You know, 4 or 5 o'clock, fourth Wednesday of the month, maybe.
Okay.
Do other designees or alternates have suggestions as far as date, time, and or location, at least for the initial meeting?
This is Brad Dietz. Just relative to the time of the day, presumably our mayor will be appointed to this, and she's mentioned to me the difficulty, particularly for us kind of on the outskirts, for a 4 o'clock meeting just to get back for evening activities. So preferably something at perhaps 3, sometime later afternoon, but not right at 4. Just create some issues from getting back into your family life at 5 o'clock.
Grimes
Brad,
would
how does
echo
she
those
feel about
comments.
7:30 a.m. meetings?
I think for Waukee, AM meetings work really well too.
Any other feedback on location or, and we talked a little bit about possibly 4th Wednesday, and then looking at maybe earlier in the day instead of later in the day, or at least earlier in the afternoon. What about location? Anybody have any thoughts location wise? I know we threw out MPO, Metro Waste. Maybe you have a preference over one or the other. If one's a better setup for, this is going to be, pretty large group. So.
I would just say, as far as I think Metro Waste, it's a really nice facility, but I think it'd be hard to fit all the alternates in there. And I mean, I'm not sure how much alternate participation is really going to happen, but if you want to at least have alternates feel like they're, encouraged to attend or wanting them to attend, MPO might be a better setting for that.
Yeah, I have to think there's probably going to be at least some staff, at least from the water producing utilities, that are going to want to attend as well. So you're going to have some staff members. They may be presenting to the board. Okay, so MPO might be a better option just to accommodate the size.
And Christina, just to point on that, I think all we're trying to do is get the first few meetings off, and get a time set so that that's not the first order of business, but we could certainly always make a change.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, all of these are just proposals. Nothing is fixed. It's really, we'll have to figure out a first meeting, and then it'll be the board's decision from there on how they want to set those future times and dates and even locations. So appreciate that, Sue. Any other further discussion on that particular item? Any additional thoughts that you want to share with the group? Checking if the.
Just a question, Christina. I know that Jody had mentioned checking with the trustees as they're appointed and making sure they don't have conflicts. So is it your thought that we're it sounds like we're talking about Wednesday and possibly early in the day, possibly MPOs, is it your thought to get some more information and then make a decision later down the road here where the first time, date, location for that first meeting based on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we'll, we already have some areas already ruled out, obviously based on other meetings that are, pretty common to this group. And so I think if we can try and identify a couple of times as as some of these additional trustees and alternates come in, and as Jody said, if there's any other additional conflicts that we need to be aware of, we can try to massage those, use those last, ones that we think might be possibles and see how that works with board representatives or alternates once they've been finally named. And hopefully, as I've, pushing to try and get that done in shorter order, because that'll be important to getting the board seated.
Christina, just one other one on focusing on Wednesday mornings is just that that first Wednesday. It's not every month, but the first Wednesday in the morning, a number of the Westcom communities have a management committee meeting, but it's only once a quarter on that first Wednesday of the month. But I know there's some others on the first Wednesday, but if Wednesday is the focus, just wanted to make you aware of that conflict for about 5 of us on here. So I guess it would be only really 3 because Urbandale West Des Moines would be the water utility, so it wouldn't be a conflict for those city folks. But
Now, what time is that meeting? Do you know?
It's usually 8 or 8:30.
8 or 8:30.
Yeah. But it's only
Okay.
once a quarter, that first Wednesday of the month, so it's not a monthly one and that's something Westcom could easily adjust. If with the size of this group, we could easily adjust ours if we had to.
Okay, that's helpful to be aware of, though.
Mm-hmm.
Any other meetings that we should be aware of that are not on this list? Okay. Good, helpful information as we try and figure out what might work for CIWW in the future. All right. So the next thing that I think might be good for discussion is the list of tasks. And I'm not sure if everybody had, if you hopefully been forwarded this email or you've seen a draft of this. And so obviously Jody's email had some items listed, and this is this document was something that staff and some of our attorneys had put together just as a stab of things that will have to be done, relatively, some of them, I should say, have higher priority than other. And I think that's what we want to discuss a little bit. And some of them are just things that early in the onset of the board that they will have to decide upon or draft themselves or take initiative on. So I think what we wanted to do at this meeting was, one, have hopefully everybody's had a chance to kind of take a look at this list. And, staff just, we're pretty new to starting up an organization. Wanted to see if there were other things not included on here that we should put on what I'll say is kind of a to-do list at some point. If you want to add anything to this list, I think this would be the point in time that we'd want to hear those suggestions. Now, I'm just making sure everybody can see that list up on their screen. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So I'll open that up for discussion. If there are items on here that staff have maybe overlooked, being pretty novices to this task, see if there's anything that the folks online would like to add.
Christina, Amy Kaler, one thing that I don't believe is on this draft is, talking about a website, and talking really not just the website, but the best platform for communications, and both for the public and for the board, where can we keep a central repository?
Yes, that one was something that I think will be needed, and ideally pretty short order. I know we're trying to make do amongst some of the free utilities and posting here. And I know that there's been a location at the Des Moines Waterworks website for 28E documents and some other things as we've moved along in this process. But if CIWW becomes an entity, it will need its eventual landing space and how board members are going to access document. And certainly we want to provide whatever available board packets and transparency on any of those agendas as possible.
Yeah, and this is Dale Atchison. I think we want to be clear here is that, we're obviously it's a struggle starting up a new entity. And we want to, in the first minutes, we got minutes that's going to be posted here. Obviously, some things that need to take place before even the first board meeting to get things moving forward. So, if those things are posted on Des Moines Waterworks, West Des Moines, Urbandale, or whoever, just to make those things open and transparent, that's just the beginning function. And then certainly the board will take ownership of it and set up their own website and make those things all come to fruition. But in the beginning stages here, we're just trying to make it function as best as we can and as open as we can.
Thanks, Dale. It's a little clunky, so for some of us, just making sure that that's all coordinated. So, there could be some discussion, at a subsequent meeting about going ahead and at least buying a domain, one of us buying the domain, because we don't really actually even own any sort of website domain at this point for CIWW. So just something to be thinking about.
Christina, this is Sue Hufford. I have a question. The fifth bullet down, I'm sure would include this, but I would think we would want some kind of a operating budget that we would know how much money we would have for the various contracts that we may need or services that we would need to have, a website to develop that. So as long as we have something about the financial management of the new entity and that first, or in the fifth bullet, I think that's be critical. Even as we, start to put together a job description for the general manager, CEO, or legal services, or whatever, we probably need a good idea of what kind of funds we have.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that many of you know that West Des Moines Waterworks hired PFM to help with putting the model together and providing that, I should say it's a reimbursable expense, obviously, by CIWW at some point, but we've been helping front that, and that is something that I know we've had a conversation with Matt Stoppel, because all of us are in various stages of our budgeting process. And so if you recall from the 28E, there is a startup amount that's due from each entity within a certain time frame. And this is where Amy Kaler is going to tell me what that time frame is. I think it was, I don't know all the ones. Amy, do you know which, what's the time frame?
Isn't it 60 days?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So there's an amount there, and I know that's on at least Matt Stoppel's mind, trying to get that communicated out to various communities about what that amount is expected to be, and then when it's due. So that obviously is a factor, at least early on, in that those are meant to be funds to help with these startup costs. So I don't know that any of us have tried to break down that amount into the various things that will be needed. We probably might be a task for staff to sort of run a pencil level what we think that looks like at some point here in the near future.
Will you guys be invoicing for that? And like council like that.
Yes, will we be invoicing for it? There's no we yet, so that's a little challenging. That I think is something we're trying to figure out. How does that get invoiced when CIWW is an entity yet? That's why some of the things that are on there is about, bank setup and things like that. I don't know that, Amy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on invoicing. We haven't really talked about invoicing that startup account and how that would happen. It is a question that has come up, but none of us have really tried to answer that yet on the timing. But certainly, and CIWW is going to have a bank account to deposit to. So I suspect that the invoices wouldn't actually occur until after the first board meeting and some of those things get established. So.
One other thing that, Jody again, one other thing that will come due and need to be paid fairly quickly is the coverage for the insurance. Again, the thought process has been that we should have at least directors and liability insurance in place when the board first meets. And if you have that insurance in place, there's going to be an invoice that's going to need to be paid relatively quickly. So there are those type of expenses that are going to start almost immediately.
Now I know why staff put this sort of draft list together, because I think at the staff level we started thinking about all the things that need to occur kind of pretty quickly once CIWW becomes an entity. Any other items that are not currently on the list that come to mind by our group here? A lot of experience in this group, so be curious to see what your thoughts are. All right. If something comes to mind, let me know. I don't think that Amy, Ted, Dale, or I think that we have thought of everything, because that's for sure not the case. It does seem like things pop up in our head on a weekly basis of something else to be thinking about. I think one of the other items that we kind of wanted to maybe tackle today is sort of talking about a prioritization of the list. And I know Jody spoke of one particular item, and that is insurance for the trustees and the director at the onset, as being a pretty high priority item. I guess I will open it up for the group to see if there are any others that you want to identify as, I'll call, extreme high priority on the to-do list here.
Christina, this is Ted, and I would add to your request there. Are there things that the group feels like need to be done before the first meeting? Because I feel like a lot of things we've talked about, even opening a bank account and sending out the invoices and some of those things, we'll take all those things to the board on their first meeting, and they're going to have to authorize us to open a bank account and do all of those things, or authorize whoever, authorize sending out the invoices. But if we want to have insurance in place before that first meeting, then somebody's going to have to do something. that might be something that we need to investigate and see what the options are and report back to the group. But are there other things that we feel like need to be in existence before that first meeting? Because we get into this kind of chicken or the egg thing, you know, where the entity doesn't exist yet. So how can it authorize anyone to do these things? So hopefully it's a fairly limited number of things that we need to look into before the first meeting. And somehow we're going to have to craft that agenda for the first meeting even before the entity really gives anyone authority to do that. But it won't be any decision making. It'll just be items for consideration by the board at the first meeting. What else do we need to have done in advance?
Ed and Christina, I wanted to, I wanted to ask, with the, you know, Christina, you mentioned your work with the contracted work with PFM. And I know those were included in the agreement in terms of obviously front-loaded costs that the micro group, that the 3 utilities bore before the entity is getting formed here. Is any of that works, that contracted work, still open in the sense of it could be continued at least into as the board forms on? I'm just thinking of some of the financial pieces, and maybe there isn't a reason for any of that, but I know you all engaged a little bit of legal, but I think it was all legal from your respective organizations. I'm just wondering if there is, you know, if there needs to be some recognition of continuing some of those agreements, to your point, Ted, to be ahead of the board forming, just to have those protections. And I think insurance is another one that Jody pointed out. So I don't know. That was just a thought of, we're in this kind of ad hoc situation where we don't really have an entity yet. Could we continue some of those pre-relationships, knowing that there's some risk there? I get that, but I don't know if that was a thought at all that the 3 utility boards had.
Yeah, there definitely was some thought on a couple of areas that we could continue in a short duration of existing services, and then the board could take the initiative to, you know, do the RFP or however they want to procure those particular positions in the long term. And so a couple of ones that came to mind were PFM, or because they've been doing the modeling and sharing that data out. I will share, Matt, I think our initial contract with them was $100,000, and I know we just paid an invoice for somewhere around mid-80s. So there's a little money there, but I don't know if Matt has billed all of what he needs to bill yet. I can follow up on that. So PFM would be one. The other is legal representation. And so, you know, one thing that came to mind, because we've been using Amy Beattie with Brick Gentry and Rick Mall with Dickinson Law, and because they kind of represent multiple entities, because Amy represents, I think, some other communities that are involved in this, that maybe having them continue as what I'll call co-counsel for an interim period of time helps provide some balance and support until the board hires formal legal representation. Those were 2 of the items, or two areas that I think that the 3 GMs had kind of had some consideration. Ted or Dale, were there other ones that I'm forgetting? Or were those the 2 primary ones that I think we were thinking of at this point?
I think those are the primary things, Christina. And, you know, one of the things we talked about was kind of just being on hold here until all of the communities have made their decisions and have voted, which would be the 13th of February, I think, is when Grimes is scheduled to vote, and Warren on the 12th, just to make sure that everybody gets on board and we know where we're at. And then once everyone has voted, we can get the agreement signature pages in, get the agreement recorded. And then I think The vision was we start sort of like assembling options for the board to consider. You know, what could they do for legal counsel? What could they do for financial services? And we can take those things to the board so that they can make the decisions at that first meeting, at least kind of a direction that they want to go, likely with some help from the folks who have been helping us thus far, but not to the extent that they've been identified as legal counsel or financial consultant for Central Iowa Waterworks, but just get us to the point where we can give the board options to consider at the first meeting.
Correct. Like, so they would be operating under us, and then that first board meeting, there'd be a proposal for maybe an interim short period of time until, surely, I mean, I think we all can agree that the first meeting, they won't be able to hire permanent attorney or permanent financial. They may want to go through their own procurement process and evaluation to do that. So, but help that, as you spoke to, help in the kind of stopgap, area. We see some merit to that.
Matt, this is Sue Hubbard. I'm really glad you brought that up because there's been a real sensitivity that we want to make sure we don't overstep until all the entities are on board. So I hope everyone is seeing this as we're truly just trying to get a head start so that first meeting when we do have a fully seated board that we can go to work and stand up this organization. But Matt, I think you're spot on that if we could connect with some entities that, hit the ground running because they know every detail that's in the 28E, for instance, that would be extremely helpful.
So further thoughts on high priority items, even before maybe the first board meeting, if anybody has thoughts on that? So, one of the things I think everybody can start to think about is that, there's not going to be an executive director day one, and there's going to be a process in that time frame, and thinking about who's going to kind of organize all those items for the board, at least in an interim period of time, will be something the board needs to decide on. Certainly Ted, Dale, Amy, and I have been working to try and organize as a team what we think might be needed for CIWW, and that might be something that the board might ask to continue for a short period of time. But as we mentioned, someone's going to have to put a board packet together and get at least an initial one and get that going. So if anybody has any thoughts on that, or if you have other recommendations for those tasks, we certainly are open to them. And so right now I have the big, maybe the things to consider. And again, like Ted said, I think we're kind of on a bit of a holding pattern, wanting to, get the last two entities do their formal board actions. But insurance, I heard from the group insurance, and then maybe some interim continuation or short period, at least until the first board meeting of services from the PFM and the current legal counsel that's been primarily helping with the 28E writing and reviewing. Any other items before the first board meeting that they see in this list that in your thought process might be important to address early on?
Christina, this is jumping back, but Jody, I would look to you. I guess you have the contacts at MPO. Going back to our first agenda item, I'm assuming you would check with them on the Wednesday 3 o'clock time frame or Wednesday 7:30 or whatever the options are. I think we all came to somewhat of an agreement on that, but we just didn't designate anyone to actually follow up.
I'm more than willing to follow up on any of these items, Sue, but you already pointed out that there's a lot of sensitivity by at least a few people as to how this goes about, and without a dialogue to see if there's a comfort level there. At some point, somebody's going to have to take the reins and put together at least an agenda for the first meeting. And whether that's the staff, if there's a comfort level of the staff doing that, I'm certainly there, but we don't want to follow with others saying that there's somebody's taking upon themselves to make a lot of decisions for CIWW before it even has its first meeting. So.
Yeah, I think what we kind of talked about doing is putting together some potential times and kind of pushing to get those final board representatives and alternates identified, and also kind of checking to make sure there's no other conflicts. So we might come up with actually several possibilities as we wait for those final representatives, and I think staff are happy to kind of tackle that objective, and then checking with the MPO to see if they may have other meetings that have conflicts, or just confirming whether those options are available, and then narrowing down as we get those final board representatives and alternates.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Christina, I would also offer that I think that it's something that the staff representatives could do, try to come up with an initial outline of a board agenda for the first meeting that could be shared, so that there could be some reaction to that. Obviously, the agenda is not a decision-making instrument, but we need to know what we're going to take to the board, and so I think that's something that staff could put a little thought into, get that started. Okay. I think we could look at this question about insurance, what can be done before the entity even exists, provide some feedback on that, and then we can follow up on the question of time of day. It sounds like Wednesday seemed to be possibility for the folks on the call, and we can see as others are seated, other trustees are identified, we can just kind of follow up on that, and then we can provide feedback to the group. What do you think about meeting again before we set the first board meeting date? Would that be appropriate to have another meeting like this with even more trustees, where we could have some of that work done and share that information in an open meeting like this to get the agenda agreed to?
I agree. This is kind of the segue into the last item for discussion today is, probably looking at a doodle poll maybe that could be sent out, and we would be looking to set another work session kind of such as this, again, open to anyone that is interested in participating, but I think we'll send a doodle poll at least to the people that attended today and any of those that we already know identified representatives or alternates from. And if we don't have that, we'll just send that to the point of contact for that individual entity. And just send out a doodle poll and probably look, I think it makes sense. We're all kind of waiting to see and finalize Grimes and Warren Rural Water, looking for a date post those votes. So that way everybody feels like everybody's had a chance to take, all those entities are in a final format here. And then get really in earnest about setting a date for the first board meeting. So, does that sound, go ahead.
Well, this is Jake and Grimes, just for whatever it's worth. We're tracking towards approval on February 13th. I foresee no issues with our council on any of this. And if it's helpful to the broader group to go earlier, like, I don't think you're going to offend Grimes at all if some of this gets started before we're formally approved and ratified and all that, just for whatever that's worth.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. And I'm happy to follow up. I don't know if Stan is still on the line, or I know he had issues with audio earlier. Maybe he's just able to listen. Let me Stan on there. But Stan, if you want to comment on any of that, you can. If not, I'm happy to follow up with you and get your thoughts. Frankly, in a large group like this, if I can, being even 2 weeks out could get a little challenging to try and get as many people as possible. I know schedules fill up fast for many of the folks on here. It's probably not a huge deal to wait until right after that vote and try and find an earnest of time. But happy to follow up with Stan and get that doodle pull out. And as Ted mentioned, we're going to work on a few of these items in the meantime. And we would expect that the next meeting, like I said, we'll be circulating a draft agenda ahead of that meeting, and getting feedback from this group on if we've got everything we should. Okay. I want to respect everybody's time. I think we had planned, I don't know that we had an end time, but I think we've covered what we had hoped to cover today. And it's just the start. So I know I can speak on behalf of at least our staff and our trustees that we're excited to work with our partners on this and looking forward to this process. Any last items to share the group before we end this meeting?
Thanks for running it, Christina.
You're welcome. Any from anybody in the that ventured here to join me in person? It helped fill the room. Otherwise, it would have been a big room by myself. That's for sure.
There you go.
Very good. All right. Well, we'll put the minutes together of today's discussion. Expect those to go out, and hopefully, probably the same email, get the doodle pull out as well. All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jody, good luck with your audio. I couldn't hear it most of the time.
Thank you, Jeff.